Sorry. Okay. Okay, we will call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. We need to do the roll call, don't we? Yes. Okay.
Anderson,
Here.
Jack,
Here.
Broker,
Here.
Gardner,
Here.
Gaunt,
Here.
Lachey,
Here.
Mans is out today.
Okay. Yes, with Chairman Mans out, I am chairing the meeting today, so bear with me. We only have an hour, but so I'm going to work to keep it efficient. So we'll start with the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Go ahead, Holly.
Second.
Holly.
I'll second, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, the approval of the minutes. I actually don't think we have that. Yeah.
Today.
Okay, we do not have to worry about that one, so we'll move on to agenda item 4. So agenda item 4 is public comments on agenda items. I will just remind everyone that we have a limit of 3 minutes, which we'll have to strictly stick to, given our time limit today for the meeting. Please state your name and also where you live when you come to the podium or if you speak over Zoom. I do also just want to quickly remind everyone that the public comments are on the agenda items, which is really just one item. And that's a possible resolution recommending the creation of an advisory committee by the city council on short-term rentals. So that is the one item. I just wanted to clarify. That's the scope of what we're looking at today. So with that, we'll open it up to public comment.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Jane Underwood, 130 Perryman Street. I think this is a great idea that we're doing something about this. I've been in a number of meetings here regarding short-term rentals. I just hope that the committee that's going to be advising this august body is made up of citizens of the city, which I've been living in. Well, it'll be 78 years this coming May. So I just hope we have the citizens on this committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.
My best friend, you want to go and speak? Oh, okay. You also say-
No one on Zoom?
Hi. He stopped on shoulder.
Hi, this is Brian Elmore of 985 Ridgeview Lane. I just wanted to make sure that the committee that's advising this is actually representative of all potential people that are being impacted by the decisions that are made. So contrary to the previous commentary, I would want to make sure that it's a blend of people that are both representing the citizens that reside there full time, but also those that may have partial interest in the city of Saugatuck and the city we love and the homes that we use for varying portions of the year. So just want to make sure that it represents everyone's interest, and also just want to add to that commentary of just making sure that the people that represent the committees and whatever interest they're particularly representing, that they actually have a means of gathering feedback from others, and it doesn't just become an advocacy point for one person's opinion that happens to represent a particular constituency of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Either on Zoom?
Williams, 1050 Elizabeth Street. And I think it's a great idea to have a committee to do this. And I do believe that the committee should be comprised of property owners, business owners, and residents of the city. And that should be the major component of the committee, those that are stakeholders in the city. That includes property owners who may not be here all the time, but they have a right to a voice, and they could be on the committee, even though they may not be residents here. And business owners who may not be voters here, or property owners, should be eligible for the committee because they are stakeholders, and whatever decisions are made are perhaps will affect them financially and within the community. And also, I think whatever surveys are done, they should be done properly and completely so that the data collected is complete and accurate. So that not just limited people are polled for their opinions. It should be complete, similar to what was done when the marijuana query was done a few years ago with the direction of Cindy Osmond. So it should be complete. The data should be accurate and reliable, not faulty. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else, or? I think that might be everyone. Okay. Since no one, I think we captured all the comments. We'll move on to agenda item 5, old business. There is no old business. So that'll take us to new business. Agenda item 6, A, which is the resolution recommending the creation of a short-term rental advisory committee in accordance with section 4.28 of the city charter. And if okay by everyone on the planning commission, I thought what might be helpful to kick off the discussion is a very brief overview by Ryan of the advantages of an advisory committee, both for us, but also for the public over the planning commission taking on this role. So if I could pass it to you.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Thank you. At your last meeting, the Planning Commission reviewed kind of some short-term rental data for the city. As a reminder, the Planning Commission and the City Council have both set, looking at short-term rentals as a priority for 2023. And so your last meeting, you discussed a desire to prepare a more formal resolution, making a recommendation to the City Council to form a advisory committee in accordance with the option that's available under the city charter that essentially states that the mayor, with the advice and consent of the City Council, and establish advisory committees. And part of that was also kind of a recommendation, coming from staff as well for a few different reasons. There's multiple facets to short-term rentals. Certainly, the Planning Commission is viewing it from a planning perspective and a zoning perspective. There's also a regulatory and police powers perspective and pieces of the ordinance that could be added or updated. And then there's also concerns that have been raised about fees and where maybe those dollars go and what they go towards. And so some of those decisions are really, policy related decisions that the City Council is responsible for. So the Planning Commission certainly could set its own committee, but you would be more limited in scope to just the zoning issues. And so if you want to take more of a comprehensive look at all of the concerns from, the policy at the policy level, regulatory side of things, police power side of things, fees and zoning, an advisory committee formed under the City Council's purview is probably the most comprehensive way to do that. Your city attorney's here today as well, in case anybody would like to hear from him and his perspective and maybe a proper approach as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions from any of the planning commission members on that, or?
No, I would just thank you. Thank you for filling in today for Chairman Mans. Russ Gardner, I'm also on the Saugatuck City Council. I'm the representative to the Planning Commission. I just wanted to kind of set appropriate expectations here is that there's a process that's going to be followed, assuming the Planning Commission today approves this resolution, which needs some fine tuning for the council to consider, would then go to the workshop agenda next Wednesday for discussion. Then if it moves from there, it would go over to the city council meeting the Monday following for formal adoption, if that's the route that this takes. So there will be plenty of opportunities for further input into this at a public level today. Well, a little bit today, but more next week, and then at the council meeting on the Monday, week from Monday. So I just want to make sure we're not going to get into details about what the solutions look like today. It's more about setting the direction that we want this task force to go. So.
Okay. Great. Well, with that, if, unless anyone else has any other thoughts, I thought we could, big picture thoughts, I thought we could dive into the draft resolution itself. So I think paragraphs 1 through 4, if everyone, again, unless there's dissent, I think are sort of more perfunctory, probably nothing we need to be discussing. I think the meat of it is paragraphs 5 through 9. I know it's not numbered, but basically paragraph 5 down to the last paragraph. I think the last paragraph is the makeup, and then paragraphs 5 through 9 go to the purpose of the committee. So just going in order of the resolution, I thought perhaps we could talk about the purpose, paragraphs 5 through 9 first. And happy to open it up to discussion, or I can start by throwing out some questions that I know have come to us through the public, if that might be helpful. Okay. So I guess one kind of broad question is, do we think the purpose, mission, or goals within these paragraphs need to be clearer? Or do we think we captured the goals and what we want this commission to do?
Thank you, Chairman Broker. This might be kind of a fine point, but I really would like to see us refer to this as a task force as opposed to an advisory committee, because it really is a task directed. If we go through with this, it's really task directed. I would defer to say, if we want to refer to this as a task force throughout the document, I think that might be a easier thing for people to kind of understand what the group is. And I think it's important, as you mentioned, that we really begin to define best we can at this point what the mission of this is. Why are we going down this path, right? And it's really to study and make recommendations to the Planning Commission and City Council for the regulation and management of short-term rentals in the city of Sagatuck, period. But why? Why is this an important issue for the community? In my opinion, it's to maintain the residential character and livability of the neighborhoods, and to prevent the adverse effects of the transient occupancy of dwelling units on our residential neighborhoods. So it's necessary for us to limit and regulate the transient occupancy of dwelling units by investigating the rental permitting violations and impacts of the short-term rental program on the city of Sagatuck. That's why I personally feel like this is important to move forward with.
I'm sorry, what you just read, is that something you authored, or is it in here?
No, it's something I sent to the, it's something I sent to the zoning administrator last night as for a discussion today.
Okay, and you're asking, I'm sorry, I'm confused a couple ways here. You're asking if that language you just read to be incorporated into the resolution verbatim, or is it just something you're thinking about?
I'm putting out there as a discussion item for us to say, why are we doing this? What is the mission? And why is this important for us to be talking about this topic? That's where I'm going with this.
So what you just read, you are not suggesting be incorporated verbatim into this resolution?
Well, if the Planning Commission feels that's appropriate, certainly wouldn't stand in the way of it.
Okay, the reason I ask is I have not seen it.
Okay.
One of the commissioners mentioned at the last meeting, it's kind of hard to discuss things that we haven't seen in writing. I mean, I don't, from what you read out loud pretty fast, I didn't see any red flags or any problems with what you said, but I am not 100%. I don't think I could repeat back much of what you just said.
I spoke fast, thank you.
No, that's not a criticism as much as this is the first blush of it.
Mhm.
So I was just trying to figure out what you were saying and what was the purpose of what you were saying. So
And this is sort of, that sounded like a lot more of a point of view. So my recommendation is that we don't include it in this formal document. I think.
I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to cut you off, which I apologize for doing, but we did end the public comment
Oh,
section,
I'm sorry. I thought this
so
was a general.
apologies.
feedback.
Yeah,
My apologies.
well, sorry about cutting you off, but
There seems to be several pages that are floating around, but we don't all have.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong.
We print a copy of the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
I see these other things that are floating.
She has one that I just gave that I had an extra copy of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So just to comment, Russ, to what you said, I think at our last meeting, we talked about there's lots of perspectives, and that's the part of this group is to go out and get all their perspectives. And your point of view is clear, and it may be shared by quite a few people, but I'm sure there's others, and that's, this group needs to get all of those point of views. So I don't feel it needs to be added to this, but that's what this task force is to go do.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it won't be the only one. The other comment I have is I just started, I went on 5, and it's held by citizens of the city. I think there's opportunity to, this one really talks about getting the surveys and getting all the information. At least for gathering the information, I really think the property holders, some of the other stakeholders should be included in those surveys by this group. So I would want to add that to paragraph 5 to not just be the citizens, but other stakeholders as well.
You bring up a very valid point about the composition and who actually would potentially be on this task force. I had a conversation with Chairman Mans before the meeting and because that's a concern I have too. My opinion on that is at this point is to maybe not make that a stipulation in here quite yet, because I think, and based on some of the public comments we had, that there might, as soon as you say just residents, the applicant pool goes down greatly. And so I think that we should maybe not worry about that quite yet. I think council may have an opinion about that too.
I agree. That's paragraph 9 or down the road, but 5 in particular is talking about gathering the perspectives. And I think that needs to be opened up for sure.
Oh, absolutely. 100% agree. 100% agree.
I would agree with changing the word in paragraph 5 from citizens to either residents and other interested parties, or just residents, or
Property owners.
stakeholders, property owners,
Yeah.
property, something broader. I think
Yeah,
that's a good, I
that's-
think that's a good flag.
So if you're all right with it, as you guys go along and have some consensus on language, we'll make the changes live, and that way you can see,
Perfect.
everybody can see what's ultimately the final product here. So-
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We can see the red line. Okay, very helpful.
So Mr. Lachey, instead of, so you
I'm
wanted to
looking-
strike,
Yeah, I'm looking behind your head. I can see.
Okay.
Held by. Well, it was your idea, so what do you?
I think stakeholders is wide enough and covers all, I would say, but, or I'm okay with having just say citizens or property owners.
is there,
How
So make sure there's
about
consensus
residents,
before we make-
Property and business owners, so that it's not too broad.
There you go.
Okay.
Those are the 3 that we
Because
really,
tourists would say they
Sure.
have a stake, and I
That's a
don't know
good
that we
point.
need to
Yeah.
open it.
Residents, property and
And
business
business
owner.
owners.
I like that.
Yep.
There we go.
bigger.
Do we want to go back to Russ's language? Do we wrap up the discussion on that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just put that out there is because what I've heard from a number of people is why is this group even important to the city? And what I'm thinking through is, okay, if I was to try to explain to someone why this is important, that's that statement. Is to, there's some pretty strong words in there. I'm open to, editing that, but I think it's important for us to have in here a very clear mission on what, not even mission, but why is this being done?
I'm not wed, I didn't author it. I'm not wed to paragraph 5, but I think it's sufficiently vague and sufficiently specific to cover the concerns. And you as a city council member, if somebody comes to you and says, what the heck is this task force or advisory committee about? I think you have a really great way to respond to them. And I think any of us can have our own take on it. But I think personally, I think paragraph 5's fine as is.
I had suggested some of the tweaks that make up the current draft and intentionally left it left it higher level again, so that this task force can then get more specific, sort of not lead the or add too much structure. I mean, I get what you're saying, Russ, and I think at some point we need to get that specific and clear. But my thinking was higher level at this point might give people more room to be open-minded and come at it. So that was the rationale
Okay.
for the edits I made to this.
With that, do we want to take a look at paragraph 6? Then I'm fine going just in order, paragraph by paragraph.
Sure.
Okay.
I have suggested some changes and I printed out to the point last week, Mark.
Thanks.
And I sent it to Sarah so she can, if, when we get to that, we can do that now, but pass those around. Can you all see the screen? Okay. And I guess I want to acknowledge Mr. Bouck's comments, which were, I thought, very thought provoking to me and really informed some of the changes I've recommended here. I think the other change that occurred to me was the one we just made. When we talk about the constituents or stakeholders, I do think it's important to get the residents, the property and business owners, so it's not only Saugatuck residents. So I would change my changes that you'll see, but so are we on paragraph 5 or 6?
Oh, I think we're on paragraph 6. I was, if everyone's comfortable with that our changes. Okay, so I think we're on paragraph 6. I'm just reading, Holly, your edits to paragraph 6. Which I will read out loud because I just realized, oh, no, we have it on. Okay, I was gonna read it out loud, but then I realized if you can put it up. Yeah, Holly's.
So,
Or you can do, yeah, whatever.
so just for
There we go.
just a point of clarity here. The document that was actually in the packet, which was sent to the public, is the one that I've got on my screen. So the document that Holly's brought, the information that I sent to the zoning administrator last night is not incorporated in here, correct? So when we work from a document, so the public understands what that final resolution is going to look like, is it that document or is it one that's in the packet that we're going to adjust this one?
We're adjusting the one that was in the packet, but because you had some, both of you had some suggested changes and wanted to distribute those to your fellow planning commissioners, which is fine at your meeting. We also wanted to make sure that the public was also aware of what those potential changes were. So that's why they're available in that format.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense because then this way the public can see what we're looking at right
With
here.
the
on
suggestions,
paper.
exactly.
Okay,
Wanted everybody
yeah.
to, have
Thank
access
you.
to the information. Yep.
And just for the sake of the public, I will mention, we are talking about paragraph numbers. They're not numbered. And this is probably straightforward, but just so you know, you do have to do some counting. Sorry about that. But this one with red line changes is paragraph 6. I think that's what we're looking at now with, or the first one at the top of the screen. The whereas a short-term rental advisory committee should gather data. So any comments on Holly's suggested changes?
I think they're positive. I would be in support of those being added.
Okay, well, I agree. I like them too, Holly. So thank you. And in fact, I think, I don't think this needs to go in here. I like the including but not limited to language because I would imagine there might be quite a bit of data generally and, studies done on short-term rentals that can be brought upon.
The other thing we might want to get in there at the very end of like the sentence, when we say community feedback, and maybe we say community and property and business owner feedback again, just underscoring that we want to make sure we get to.
It's as inclusive as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Changing the word instead of and community feedback.
And maybe
And-
change it to resident, property, resident, property and business owner feedback.
So the same
Just to
formula.
mirror what was said
Yeah.
in the prior, earlier paragraph.
I'm channeling my inner Chris.
Okay. Um, is everyone okay? Any other comments on paragraph 6? Okay.
Can we go back to, and I think actually this was a good idea, because each of these paragraphs refer to rental advisory committee. And Russ raised the idea of referring to this as
Oh,
a
yes.
rental,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a short-term rental task force. As we go through each of these paragraphs, do we want to, beginning with the
Mm.
first line resolution recommending, do we want to change it to task force, or are we okay with advisory committee? What do other people think?
I am fine with it. I do have one question that I have, and maybe this is for Chris or Ryan. Is the term advisory committee something we need to stick to for the sake of language in the city charter, or?
Refer to your city attorney on that.
Yeah, I think it's probably related, but I don't think it's super hung up on. I think
Okay.
ultimately the document that I saw that you're currently working from pretty clearly indicates that it's gonna be a fact-finding body without delivering policy. And that's gonna be the controlling thing. I'm not overly concerned about the label that you give. So.
Okay.
I don't think the charter requires specific.
Good question.
Yeah.
Don't want somebody to file a lawsuit against.
That's right.
Yeah,
Okay, so should we go through and change all the advisory committees references to task force? Would that?
that's what I'm proposing.
I think that's a good change.
Yeah.
I support it. Yep.
And to kind of add to that, the other thought process behind that, from my perspective, was that an advisory committee has how long is this advisory committee going to be advising as opposed to a task force?
Yeah.
Finish the task.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Complete the task.
There's a task.
There's the
Right,
task.
good point.
And I think if you agree, I think we can just specify that generally and let you.
Yeah, we can make
Go
that change
through.
after.
Okay,
Yep, we'll,
okay.
we'll have a clean copy for you at the end with your
Okay.
changes.
But
Yep.
you caught it, every reference to advisory committee, we're changing to task force?
Task force,
Okay,
yep.
great.
Understood.
Just want to make sure.
Yep.
You caught it.
Okay. So then are we okay moving to paragraph 7?
Yep.
Which I think Holly, it looks like you have some edits on as well. About,
Mr. Bauk's point about sort of capturing dissenting
Mhm,
points of views is
mhm.
important, so that was what I added and balanced.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I thought that was a great point.
measurement as well, I added to that.
I thought that was a great point. I also was curious what everyone thought about the supermajority suggestion. Now, again, I don't know if we can specify that or not, but.
My personal opinion about this is that, and having written this for the Bald Head Work Group, we tried to be as high level as we could possibly be because we didn't want to get the group to be bogged down in details. So I would think that in terms of any kind of adoption about process should be done by the task force itself. So following Robert's Rules of Orders, for instance, or, things of that nature, as opposed to defining specifically here.
In terms of process.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying the language as Holly submitted is fine or not? Russ, you lost me again. I
Yeah,
understood what you
no, I-
said, but
yeah,
I
I
didn't know
don't-
if you wanted it deleted or it's fine as is.
No,
As
no, I think-
suggested by Holly.
It's a super majority question that got my comment, that not the language that Holly was.
Oh, I
suggesting.
got you. I'm with
Oh,
you
yeah,
now.
that was separate. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse
I'm up
issues.
to
That was
speed.
not in there, but
So I thought that was it was an interesting concept. I do think, I think the concern is, and I think we all share it, is we really want this to be fair and representative, and so that no
mhm.
one interest group has a dominant voice. or
Mhm.
vote.
Mhm.
I'm hoping that I'm recommending that we add some language later about disclosing interest, because I think that was a
Mm.
really good recommendation. And maybe, and consolidating a couple of the groups and adding one that that the makeup of the group will be such that we wouldn't need a super majority. And again, if that is something that down the road needs to happen, there's still steps in the process where that could take place. So that was my reasoning for not incorporating that idea here, for what that's worth.
Okay.
One person's opinion.
But that's a paragraph down the road.
That's a paragraph.
So what paragraph are we on?
So is if I hearing no other comments on paragraph 7, I think we're on paragraph 8.
Okay.
Whereas if the short-term rental advisory committee determines there is a need for changes to the current short-term rental policies, that one. Looks like you didn't have edits to that, Holly, but of course, if anyone else has comments or edits, that's fair game.
There was a comment made at the last meeting, which I forgot until just now, that I thought was worthwhile, and it was that that the committee focus more on, I'm looking at the word similar resort focused communities, that we look at Michigan instead of
You're right.
Arizona, California,
correct.
Timbuktu. So policies of similar resort focused communities, primarily in Michigan, perhaps,
Mhm.
I like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's a good.
not exclusively, but primarily in Michigan
right.
is my thinking.
Yeah.
And I would almost bias, but I won't insist on it.
Say what? I'm sorry.
I would almost bias, but I won't insist on it on Michigan.
Okay, so you would rather have exclusively in Michigan. I don't care one way or the other, but
But I won't be stubborn about it.
Okay.
I think the winners make a difference. So that's why I think Michigan's
Yeah.
key to it. It's not, it's
Exactly.
different than, so I think primarily of Michigan is
Yeah,
weighted by Michigan, something to that.
yeah. And I think there'll be enough data there.
And it just
Alone.
using places
You're
that
alone.
are so dissimilar to us, just you spend a lot of time discussing that or arguing about that.
Right.
In terms of why Palm Springs or why,
Right,
Right.
um,
Boca Raton, I don't
yeah,
know.
right,
right.
right.
I
So
like-
I would just rather
yeah.
stay in Michigan.
yeah, I'm thinking primarily now because there are resort communities in Wisconsin, there's
Mhm.
resort, you know, Provincetown and in the Cape. Those all get cold in winter. I don't know. So,
That's fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's
On Lake
fine with me.
Michigan, if you're talking about with some of those Wisconsin
right.
towns.
So, so my perspective on this is that a good idea is a good idea. I don't care if it's in Michigan or if it's in Nevada or wherever it is. And I think that I have trust in this task force, once it's actually composed and created, that they're going to be able to think through these things. And I think it's first and foremost, what does it represent for Saugatuck? I mean, I've said that repeatedly, is first things first, what's the data? What's driving the people in town in terms of what they would like to see with short-term rentals? And then bring in good ideas, and predominantly Michigan could be the first place you'd look, because there's been a lot of work in the state already. But then if there's a great idea coming from Bozeman, Montana. So I would, you know,
That's why
I
it's
don't know.
primarily instead of exclusively.
yeah.
Yeah, I was
So-
just thinking this makes a good case for primarily so that we're not limited to those.
I said I won't be stubborn about it.
Good, because when you're stubborn, you know, I know it's stubborn.
Well, then I think, any other comments on that paragraph other than adding primarily in Michigan? Because if not, I think we can move on to 9, which is that the short-term rental advisory committee will formulate recommendations on the policies, zoning ordinances, fees, et cetera. And I think that's where it goes to the point Ryan made, that this committee can go beyond just zoning and make recommendations on other areas.
Yeah, because it was brought up at the council meeting when I first brought this idea to the council for consideration, is that this task force may discover issues that are of immediate concern that can be addressed by current and can be accommodated underneath the current ordinance. That should then be brought back to the appropriate city official for, hey, this is something that's been brought out by our surveys, and it doesn't have to wait for a final report to be taken care of, in other words. So I think that's just important to continue to have that avenue, that as issues are identified that could be addressed immediately, that they're brought forward and channeled to the right person.
Russ, to that point, you just reminded me of another point that's been made, I know, I think in the comment letter that should we have milestones or specify that? It sounds like you're thinking maybe check-ins or with
Yeah,
along the way or,
and I think that would be something that the task force itself would
okay.
identify.
With the city council member on the task force, as we've specified later, there's obviously a direct conduit to the city
Right.
council.
Right, because I would, as a city council member, one of the first things I would say is, okay, where's the timeline, right? Once you get a start and a finish date, what are the steps you're going to take to get to there? We don't know what that is yet.
Mm-hmm.
Plus,
That's
there will
something-
be at least one planning commission or two planning commission commissioners on the
Correct.
committee.
Right.
Along those lines, just while we're on that topic more generally, right, do we all feel the same way about us putting a specific deadline in here that we don't need a deadline in this, that's for the
Yeah.
task force to figure out?
I had set, again, sorry for the, not getting this out to everybody in advance of the meeting, but I did send to the zoning administrator last night, speaking from experience on forming work groups like this. I think it's very important that this resolution includes a start date and a finish date.
Right.
I had suggested that this starts no later than, probably March, but finishes, makes their final report at the second council meeting of the Saugatuck City Council on October 23rd, 2023. And that the group officially terminates on December 31st of this year. Now, of course, things may progress faster, work may be brought to the council more quickly, but I think to keep that on task. And that gives appropriate time for change of seasons and people coming and going from town and I think respectful of, you don't want this thing to last forever, but enough time to get the work done correctly. So I would strongly suggest adding that language to the resolution.
So it currently says a duration not to exceed a year, so you recommend shortening. that
Yep.
Dates.
And specific dates.
Yep.
Okay, that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yep. And I did propose some language that the zoning administrator
Ah,
has that we can,
Okay,
and that would be at the tail end of the resolution itself.
okay, so maybe we can look at that language
Once
at
we
the
reach-
end and
yeah.
then go to, because I know, unless there are comments on, I think we've did 9, there's 10. I'll just make sure there aren't any comments on 10. The short-term rental advisory committee should consider but not be bound by experiences, issues, concerns, policies, practices, and regulatory and zoning ordinances of the city of the village of Douglas and Saugatuck Township.
Is it appropriate to mention the master plan
I was
anywhere?
just thinking that to
Yeah.
add as well as
Yeah.
the tri-communities master plan.
Right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Good call.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So after like Saugatuck Township and the Tri-Community Master Plan, is that what you're looking at? Okay.
Yeah, and just add it there as an and.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, does that bring us to the makeup?
Or after township, you could just say as well as the tri-communities master plan.
Nothing else on 10,
Nope,
right, okay.
not for me.
So 11 is the makeup of the committee. Holly, see you have some,
Yeah, so I added at the very
Edits.
beginning that it should represent and balance the different stakeholders, again, getting that notion of every voice heard. The other thing I suggested was I didn't recommend that we reduce the size. I know Mr. Bauk had recommended or had noted he thought it was too big. I think the size is manageable how it is, but I did think it was important to have somebody from the public schools. And so I think we could add an administrator or school board member and then consolidate. So we had one member from a commercial zone who was not an owner of a short-term rental. And then we had a real estate community with I combined those so it could be either or. And again, just trying to be sure looking for a broad swath, and it seems like the interests, we could do it with this, but again, one person's perspective.
And could you pull up the recommendation I had? As I was working through this and thinking through this, I think the more concise and more bullet pointed we can make this part of it will help people more clearly understand. It's
It's a good point.
the narrative was a little, I'm like trying to count them.
Yeah, right.
So I had sent to the zoning administrator last night just to kind of reword, but basically the same approach here. Is that, I'm sorry,
Where you at?
Oh,
right there, you got it right up.
I think you've got it.
Under the who.
Thank you.
And to kind of or to add to what Chairman or Commission Member Anderson just said, is that the task force shall incorporate a broad spectrum, and that's kind of the words I used, and balance could be another way to say it. Consists of 11 members. I think it's worth considering if we need a couple of alternates when people can't maybe attend. I'm up for negotiation on that one, but basically representative of the short-term rental industry, city of Sagatuck homeowner, city of Sagatuck resident from a commercial zone. And this is getting back to where Chairman Mance had kind of first authored this. That is not an owner of a short-term rental, city of Sagatuck resident from a residential zone that is not a short-term rental owner, city of Sagatuck Planning Commission, 2 members, Sagatuck City Council, 1 member, representative from the city of Sagatuck workforce. That could be someone that works in retail or a restaurant or lodging business owner. Chamber of Tourism representative, I think is important, as well as I like the idea of the public schools.
So you're back to 11 in what you've.
Yeah,
There.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually totaling 10 here, but that 11th one would be the public schools. So if you count the numbers here that I put behind them, and I just put the number behind them just so I can remember the count.
mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 would be the Sagatuck schools. If I'm doing my math right.
Wait a minute, what?
If you look at the
I'm trying to
number-
look at your language. So
Yep.
where do we, we consolidate 2 of yours and add the school board? Is
Yes.
that what you're saying, Russ? I'm
Well,
sorry.
no, actually, the total right there is 10, and then the Sagatuck schools would be 11. So
Okay, I
if
had
you look
that
at the
different.
parenthesis number behind each one of the items,
I do, and I just hadn't had a chance to add them up because this
They're
is again,
10.
once again, the first time I'm looking at
yep,
it.
is 10.
5.
And it's not a radical, it's not a real change from what was presented
I
in the,
understand.
yep,
I mean,
it's just
it's
trying to
taking a
clarify it a little bit, make it a little
minute
bit
to
more
absorb.
understandable.
Yeah.
so okay, all right. I'm not, with all due respect to Mr. Bauk, I'm not sure why we need a school board representative. Maybe somebody could explain that to me. In addition to all these other representatives, what fresh and new and different and missing from somewhere else that having a school member or a member of the school board administration would bring to this committee that wouldn't be satisfied somewhere else?
I think as taxpayers, especially, we invest a lot of money in our schools, and so having that voice, I kind of liken it to the Chamber of Commerce, which kind of gets to the business voice. I think the voice of the schools and just expressing, just understanding what's inside their heads with the opportunity and concerns that they might see as we increase or potentially decrease population of families with kids in school.
I do believe that we should stick with, and I'm trying to juggle 3 versions, that we should keep a member from the commercial zone. I think we need a business owner. So to make it an alternative in order to keep to 9, I mean, with the exception of 1 real estate office on Butler, art gallery on Butler, we would not have someone who is from the commercial zone who would also be a real estate realtor or from the real estate community. I mean, I think the community, my personal thought is, I think it's more important to have somebody from the commercial zone. I'm not particularly sure why we need somebody from the real estate realtor community at all. When we have somebody from the industry, the short-term rental industry, already represented as well. So
I think that's a fair point.
Mhm.
And again, this is based off of what Chairman Mans had originally drafted.
Correct.
So I can't speak for his position on this, but if you look at, and I didn't bullet point this, but if you look at the fourth item down, city of Sagatuck resident from a commercial zone, not a business owner. But if you say city of Sagatuck workforce, maybe you can just simply change that to say Sagatuck business represent, I don't know. So again, this is just, I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from. So.
One thought that I had, well, I had a few thoughts on this because it is very confusing. So one thought I had was maybe we need to just dramatically simplify it, 3 property owners, 2 business slash, real estate brokers, kind of something that simple, but the other thought I had is maybe this can be just more a recommendation of the makeup. And I say that because we're getting so prescriptive that I wonder if it would be just very challenging to, given the applications that city council would ultimately get if this were adopted. And the fact that I think under the rules for hiring, I think they all have to be registered voters. But so I just
We
wonder. if
haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, we
I,
haven't got.
I don't-
think That's worth, we need to discuss that when we get there. Or we can discuss it.
no, I was
Yeah.
with you. I think that's yet to be discussed. I haven't said this, but I think we're being very, almost Pollyanna-ish to think that we're going to get all these people who fit these categories, who are willing to step up and take on this project, given how people are already weighing in.
And
Well,
possibly
I-
on the other side, we're gonna get too many. It could be that there's a ton and then there's gonna have to be a decision-making process. I mean, Steve talked about that the other day.
Mhm.
Well, in order for this
hope
to
so.
be.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good
I'm
problem.
sorry, I'm
That's a
sorry.
Good
Hope
problem.
so.
In order for, I think, for this to be effective in the final analysis, I mean, there have to be stakeholders represented.
Mhm.
And I personally think the size of this is probably borderline too big. But whether it's 12 or 11 or 13 or 12, I think in the final analysis, it's more important that all of the stakeholders, everybody who has a stake in this has the opportunity to be represented for it to be effective in the final analysis. It's just,
I agree, and not only for that, for people, once, if any changes are made, for people to feel like their voice was,
They have
their
voice.
interests were represented.
Right.
I think that's really important.
I'm just thinking about Commissioner Gardner's point on 2 alternates. So let's say the alternates were both short-term rental owners and the 2 people who decided they didn't want to show up for 3 meetings in a row were non-short-term rental owners. All of a sudden, this fair and balanced commission is skewed to 2 people the other way.
right.
I'm not sure we need alternates. I know our zoning board of appeals has alternates. It's just pick the committee and go with it.
The sample brought it down to 9. I thought that was a good move, going from 11 down to 9.
I
In The
think
sample
that's
that was
good.
written, I
I
thought
agree.
the mix was a balanced mix. And I felt like it was a task force that could be representative. So and when you get enough people.
This is a great conversation. I knew this would probably take up the bulk of our work. I would also, just remember that council will be having feedback
Oh,
on this
yeah,
as well. And
sure.
they can, I don't know what direction they're going to take on this portion of it. You guys kind of know what my opinion is on this. I mean, I want this to be as inclusive and representative as possible. I completely agree with Commissioner Gaunt that this needs to be as open and transparent as it can possibly be, but it's got to be representative of the stakeholders within the process. So I wouldn't personally get too bogged down in this, and I just think it's open for negotiation. The alternates are open for negotiation from my perspective. I just think what's important to remember is that you want to have an odd number of people because you want to have some, presumably if you adopt rules of order, that's going to have to go to a vote. You don't want ties, things of that nature. So there's some procedural things that I always keep in mind, but I think it's, as it says here, as Chairman Mans first started, we need to have someone from the short-term rental industry. We need the real estate industry with no STR ownership. But certainly a city of Sagatuck homeowner that has a short-term rental license or is positive on short-term rentals, a resident from a commercial zone that is not the owner of a short-term rental, because there's people that live downtown here that are residents that don't have a short-term rental, and their perspective on this may be completely different. someone that's from a residential zone that's not a short-term rental owner, Saugatuck City Planning Commission 2, Saugatuck City Council 1.
And I kept up as best I could. I think the sample in our minutes or in the packets provide those items.
I think that he read, I hope, I was trying to follow along. I think he read what we had presented, which I'm fine with. And I just want to say, since you expressed, I believe, your personal opinion that you wanted this to be open and transparent as possible, and I know Commissioner Gaunt has said the same thing. My impression is all 7 of us want that. I don't think there's any of the 7 of us who want this to be restrictive or biased or anything else. So if anybody does want that, they can certainly speak up, but I think we all want that same thing.
No, I wasn't. I know that.
Yeah, no, I was only speaking for myself, but I assume everybody else has the same opinion. Just doing a time check here, it's 10 to the hour.
Yeah, so on paragraph 10, if I might close it out, or try to close it out, or I'm sorry, 11. May I make a suggestion that we either go with the original formulation or Holly's formulation? Does that, one of those 2 approaches?
The original meaning the one that went out in the package, which was
Yes.
a little different than the presented originally in the last meeting. The
Oh, I'm
original
sorry,
meaning-
the one reviewing
Yes,
in our
yep, yep.
packet.
No, that's, I'm in agreement with the one that's in the packet.
Me too.
I support that.
I would just ask that it be bullet pointed so people can more easily get away from the narrative, so we can just see bullet points about here's a representative, boom, boom, boom.
Easier to count.
Mhm.
Sure, that sounds good.
And if we can keep the words and represent and balance different stakeholders, so the composition of the committee changes, but I would like at the beginning of that.
I support the and balanced.
Yeah, cool.
That's cool.
All right.
Okay. So I think that takes us, it looks like Holly suggested 2 additional paragraphs, so 2 new paragraphs, which I'll call 12 and 13.
My personal opinion is I think that's important, but I don't know if it should be part of the resolution. I think there's a process that will be followed, and I think anybody that's going to be serving on this should be asked that question. And it should be disclosed on the application form.
Yeah, it's a question. The city council is going to put out an application form, and that within that form, it'll have to identify
Okay.
sort of where they're at.
And I think that the next one, we're kind
Yeah,
of on the fence on that one.
Draw the recommendation on the city on being registered. Because I think that, so
Okay, because I think that, oh, I'm sorry.
Question. So a member of the committee would neither be a resident or a voter.
how about
Or
we
business
say
owner?
they're a resident, registered voter, or property owner? And so there could be a property or business owner. So we could on that committee have some people who weren't. I would think the preponderance would be of residents and voters, but I think it is worth, especially for business owners, since not all business owners live here, I'm assuming.
So I'm just going to quickly jump ahead and just point out that the last paragraph includes a reference to hiring in accordance with the city council's board and commission selection policy. And I did ask Ryan for a copy of that. I couldn't find it on our city website last night. And I did read it to say that you have to be a registered voter under that policy to be on a committee, but did I misread that? Or is that flexible? Or maybe we take that out.
How about our attorney?
Yes.
Having read it when we were doing it previously, my memory is that there's a provision in that states sort of accepting applications, qualifications for applications, and there's some qualifications related to as practicable or as applied. So my memory is that the policy itself has some room of flexibility that when the application selections are recommended forward, I don't know that council is subject to the strict black and letter law. So I think that you can still read this recommendation. That's, again, I don't have it in front of me, but that's my memory when I look at it. Go for a different issue. So.
Okay,
And to Mark's point, we may need to go outside the residents to be able to fill this board.
Right.
So, yeah.
And we may want to. Again, business owners may not own the building they're in, but may have may have an interest in I can see business owners definitely have an interest on how we proceed with short-term rentals and they may not be a property, to your point, it would to add the word property owner, they may not actually own the building they're in. I would,
I am not in disagreement. I just want clarity. in
yeah,
terms
no,
of
no.
who. They should, business owner, property owner, registered voter.
Same three items we had up top, right? That's, we had the residents, we had the businesses, and we had property owners. Because that way it'd be consistent through.
Oh,
the
there you
document,
go.
Right, through the same document.
Voila.
Okay. So we'll add that as a new paragraph. And then I think that takes us to the last page. The final paragraphs on the last page, which Holly, it doesn't look like you had any edits to those and,
But Russ did.
I-
Russ, yeah,
Russ
I
did,
like
okay.
Russ's dates. I like to having the dates called out rather than.
yes.
And that was in the email that I sent to the zoning administrator last night, and actually used the Bald Head Work Group wording as kind of the basis for this. So if you want to pull that up once real quick.
Function for duration starting. If you have the wording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So report the task force recommendations to the Sagatuck City Council on or before the regular meeting of October 23rd, 2023, provided that the group does its work, and the work group shall terminate on December 31st, 2023. So that allows a little bit of flexibility in case.
When do you have the start date?
I didn't actually put a start date in there, but in my mind, it's as soon as the city council and the mayor can get the process.
My concern is putting them on,
Process.
giving them a
Right.
task and a time without knowing their schedules.
Am I missing something? I thought the advisory committee's report
Yeah.
first came to the planning commission, not straight to the city council. I'm looking at July.
That's a good point.
Task force recommended to
Yeah.
city council.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Good catch.
So do you just simply, Russ, would you just simply want to change Sagatuck Planning Commission on or before our October meeting, whatever that is?
That's the actual city council meeting, the second city council meeting in October. So what we would want to probably add is some language that the report will come back to the planning commission prior to that.
So you have that in your packet is pretty close to that. I don't know if you can port just the deadline still over to your current, because your current packet one basically addresses that. I think it's just what
Okay.
Commissioner Lachey is indicating, but it actually required one report to the commission.
Yeah.
Oh.
The third Thursday of October is the 19th. That would be our meeting. If I'm remembering, we meet normally on the third Thursday, so that would be October 19th. So change that perhaps to recommendations to the Sagatuck Planning Commission on before the regular October meeting of October 19th. Or if you're wed to having the council take it up in October, then I would suggest we need to have it at our September meeting,
Mhm,
That would be my thought.
mhm.
which gives them what? April, May, June, July, August, September, 6 months. I think that's a short time frame,
You too.
but
Also understand that, again, based on experiences, that this can be adjusted if needed. That the council can decide to extend this.
well, sure they can. Yes.
Okay.
Any other, yeah, I think we're fine. I'm fine going with aspirational, understanding it may be
Okay.
extended if no objections.
So into the Sagatuck Planning Commission. I'll pull the September meeting dates.
That would
Yes.
be the 21st of September.
First day of fall.
Mr. Lachey is on it. I like it. Just for a portion of it. Yeah,
Just
I'll make the
for the
edits. Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
so,
everything else in
We
this
meet on
paragraph.
holidays.
Yeah.
All the
I think-
major holidays.
Everything else in this paragraph.
I think covers everything unless there's other discussion anyone wants to have.
Point of order, do we need to take a vote to authorize the resolution to be sent to the council for consideration as workshop meeting next Wednesday?
Yes, I was about to ask for the vote
Perfect.
after making sure the discussion was over. I will entertain a motion then to adopt the resolution we've discussed.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving on to item 7, communication. We did have a communication from Mr. Bauk, as we've discussed, and I know we all read that and referenced it. Reports of officers and committees, I don't think we have that. We have another opportunity for public comment. If anyone has any final thoughts? I don't
Yeah,
think you have any.
this is Suresh Rajapaks from 647 Butler. I believe this to be a very fair and reasonable request to form this task force. I won't call it a committee. My only ask is I do notice that there are a couple of, planning committee members that are on this task force now. And I guess my only thought is there was some mention of coming in with the right intentions and coming not in with biases around people being against short-term rentals and whatnot, as they're selected to be a part of this committee. My sincere request is, I guess, that we try to figure that out as we're selecting members, that we aren't selecting members that are already coming in to be on this task force with maybe a negative impact, because there's really maybe 1 or 2 members that are going to be pro short-term rental. And I just want to make sure we've got some level of indication in relation to intention behind members that are selected for the task force.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Any other final comments? Okay, with that, we will adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, motion to adjourn. I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi,
Aye.
and Holly, thank you.
Adjourned at 6:01.
Thank you.
Congrats, Ann.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And for,
Thanks.
before you, yeah, you can stop.
Man.
Yeah, that was great.